The satellite view resembles a meteorite crater. These complexes were assembled like giant Lego structures. It is as if Giger was inspired by these buildings when creating the concept for the alien. So how we can distinguish the oldest temples from everything else? Let me show you. India is a country where religions, architectural styles and eras have intertwined into an incredibly complex knot, one that no one is likely to fully unravel. But today we will begin this difficult task. We will identify the truly ancient temples to confirm that India has preserved some absolutely astonishing traces of a highly advanced civilization from the distant past. We will also examine monolithic complexes carved in the rocks and talk about Vimanas. Warangal construction plant. The Warangal fort is a true megalithic mystery in the heart of India, preserving important evidence and artifacts of an ancient advanced civilization. From above, the satellite view even looks like a meteorite crater. In fact, it consists of 2 layers of defensive structures and a nearby lake suspiciously resembling an explosion crater. The fort walls are built in polygonal masonry using rather massive blocks, and in the center lie the ruins of that very proto-civilization. An area of 150 by 132 meters is scattered with ancient megaliths made from black basalt, grey and pink granite and talc chloride. These 10-meter-high stargates are made of massive pieces of grey granite tightly fitted together. The nearby power line looks quite amusing by comparison. There are 4 of these gigantic stone arches, each one about 3 times the height of an elephant. Truly unique gates. Archaeologists and historians claim they were the 4 entrances to the so-called fort. It was called a fort because, starting in the 12th century, many armies indeed built fortifications based on this structure and defended themselves here. But all these stone constructions clearly existed long before the Arab invasions. In 1310, one of the generals of King Aladdin Khilji tried to destroy these arches, but only managed to damage a few small stones before abandoning the idea. Even back then, it was difficult to destroy such structures, let alone build them. This block weighed around 15 tons, and someone intricately carved it and lifted it to a height of 10 meters. Famous blogger Praveen Mohan tried to find a deeper meaning in the asymmetrical cuts at the top of the gates, inventing fantastic theories about lasers and so on. But he simply hadn't seen 100-year-old photographs of Warangal, which clearly shows that those cuts didn't exist. At first, I thought the cuts were made by restorers for some reason, but then I looked closer and saw that the structure had simply shifted apart. If you realign it, there won't be any gaps at all. The blocks at the top will fit tightly back together. By the way, the restorers here have done some truly bizarre things. Just look at this architectural wonder. Ceiling elements stacked sideways and set in mortar. There are plenty of such reimaginings around the site. I think attentive viewers have already realized that apart from the 4 arches and the huge slabs lying on the ground, the current state of the complex is an attempt by restorers to arrange the remaining fragments into some kind of logical layout around the perimeter. Take this lingam for example. It was found nearby and simply placed here. That's why it's important for us to focus only on the original elements, and there's plenty to see. Every detail here is an incredible mystery. Even the floor looks fascinating. These strange features resemble structures in Tiwanaku, Bolivia. I can imagine how one might make this out of plastic on a 3D printer, but I honestly can't fathom how such complex elements were manually created without errors or chips. Even if we imagine casting and concrete technology, it would require an incredibly elaborate mold. One of India's calling cards is its incredibly intricate columns. This isn't even the most impressive example, though it's still quite imposing. Honestly, they remind me not of the past, but of the future. These details look like the interior of the spaceship from the science fiction movie. A very intriguing lattice here is adorned with the finest jewel-like patterns. Nearby, miniature versions of a similar columns are depicted. There's also a wall featuring carvings of dancers that resemble those from Cambodia. This part is stunning due to its polish. It even retains a metal clamp. The previously mentioned lingam is a perfectly shaped cylinder made of black basalt and polished to a mirror-like shine. Achieving this without machine tools is simply impossible. To eliminate tool marks, this piece would have to be spun 15 times faster than what's done on a pottery wheel. Not to mention that the tool itself would need to be made of at least hardened steel. Of course, we can't ignore these massive basalt statues, depictions of giants. Altogether, this site contains hundreds of ancient megaliths and just as many unanswered questions. The main one, what kind of force could have scattered such enormous blocks, tearing off large chunks as if they were pieces of chocolate? It looks like the entire complex was bombarded with ballistic missiles. A mystery in itself is how the gates managed to remain standing through all of it. This place contains a suspiciously large number of architectural components. For example, there are around 100 specific ceiling pieces from temples. How could so many temples have existed in such a small area? Perhaps these parts were actually manufactured here and then transported throughout India. After all, Warangal is conveniently located in the central part of the country, and the nearby lake looks much more like a flooded quarry than a natural lake. Extracting granite blocks here would be extremely convenient too. Most of the state of Telangana lies atop a massive granite slab. As far as I know, this isn't the only exposed formation like this. The Phongir fort, also located in the state, was built on a similar granite outcrop. Well then, it seems we've discovered one of the construction plans of an ancient civilization. Now let's take a look at what exactly it was building here. I want to thank Sergey for providing the video footage straight from India. He has a TikTok page where you can see even more amazing shots. The video also includes photos from the expedition of Ekaterina Norkina. I will leave a link to her investigation on Warangal in the description below the video. Bhojeshwar. This structure in northern India stands out significantly from the rest of the region's ancient architecture. First of all, it's square-shaped, made of sandstone, and displays a kind of gigantism that isn't very typical for buildings in this area. From the outside, it evokes associations with the Second Temple of Jerusalem. The entrance door alone is 10 meters high. Let's take a look inside. Here is a perfect example of how not to photograph ancient architecture. What do you see here? And that's one of the largest Shiva lingams in the world. It stands 5.5 meters tall with a diameter of 2.3 meters. But what amazes even more is its base. People truly appears like dwarfs in comparison. Bhojeshwar is considered unfinished, as perfectly shaped blocks have been found nearby that were never installed. There is no classic temple tower on top, nor have any of its fragments ever been discovered. Next to the structure lies an unfinished statue of considerable size, along with some intriguing scattered blocks. Another rather unusual complex is the Sun Temple in Konark, which visually even resembles a Mayan city. It is also massive and supposedly represents an enormous stone chariot of the god Surya. The temple rests on 12 pairs of huge wheels, symbolizing the hours of the day and the changing of the seasons. Many locals claim that a giant iron magnet once resided in the temple's inner sanctum, which held the main idol of the sun god suspended in mid-air. European travelers wrote that the magnet was so powerful it interfered with the navigation of passing ships. Originally, the temple was crowned by a massive tower about 70 meters high, which would have made it one of the tallest temples in India. However, confirming this is difficult. And overall, the complex has undergone so many restorations that finding the core of the truth here is extremely challenging. So we will continue our search elsewhere. Homes of the gods. Mandirs. That's what Hindu temples are called in Sanskrit. The number of temples in India reaches into the millions. A significant portion, about 85%, are Hindu temples. Hinduism is one of the oldest religions on earth, with its roots going back to the Vedic period starting from the 3rd millennium BCE. Today, it remains the most widely practiced religion in India, with over 18% of the population identifying as Hindu. Researchers have identified 6 main architectural styles commonly found across India: Nagara in the north, Dravidian in the south, Vasara in the west, Kalinga in the east, Himalayan in the mountainous northern regions, and Kerala in the southwestern state of Kerala. After digging through all this complexity, I realized one thing: how to distinguish the truly ancient temples from everything else. Here is the guide. If you see a large enclosed area on satellite images with rectangular buildings, perimeter towers and a roof like this, on the ground you will usually find a brightly painted Dravidian-style temple from the 12th century. These often feature modern depictions of mustached Indians in Bollywood style, along with endless crowds of worshippers and tourists. If you spot elaborate, mesmerizing architecture, a building with dozens of spires and multiple levels, congratulations, you've found a Nagara-style mandir, made of sandstone and river pebbles, likely built in the medieval period and restored multiple times. But if you come across a remote, often solitary and unassuming temple that from above resembles a mandala or a multi-pointed star, prepare for surprises. Those insane, lathe-like columns, bas-reliefs depicting giants, and incredibly precise carvings of the finest details in stone. This style is often referred to as Vasara, but if you look closely at these temples, you will realize their architecture is fundamentally different from anything else. The truly ancient buildings of India. Let's begin with the Veer Narayana temple in the village of Belavdi. Here is what the village looks like from above. And here is Veer Narayana. It is as if buildings from the Protoss race in StarCraft were placed right in the middle of a rural Indian settlement. The temple has 3 sanctums, each housing an idol carved from black chloritic schist, supposedly representing the 3 aspects of Vishnu. This one caught my attention the most. Remember that face. The temple also contains 108 of those same astonishing pillars, creating a truly cosmic atmosphere. In Hinduism, Buddhism and Jainism, the number 108 is considered sacred. Moreover, no 2 pillars are identical. This is believed to symbolize the infinite diversity of divine manifestation, though perhaps they simply couldn't manage to replicate the same column perfectly. There are fascinating bas-reliefs with themes from ancient Indian mythology, including this man with the head of wild boar. Interestingly, parts of this temple were later reused in 2 other temples, Hoysala and Chenakeshava. Let's take a look at those. The Chenakeshava complex, located about 20 kilometers to the southwest, consists of several buildings of a similar type. Shock content greets us right at the doorstep. It really makes you start thinking about ancient CNC machines. After all, there's not a single untouched surface on the facade of any of the buildings in the complex. Everything is covered in complex geometric figures, patterns and bas-reliefs. Some of the scenes are quite explicit, and of course the Nagas are present as well. Among the unusual elements here are mandapas like this, and walls with holes shaped in that now familiar pattern, a callback to the Warangal factory. Of course, you will find all the same columns here, and some of them are simply incredible. Like this one, a very rare and unbelievably complex piece. It is mind-boggling how they made it. One wrong move would ruin everything. And if the exterior carving blows your mind, just imagine the interior work. It's just out of this world. With our modern logic, it's hard to understand why they went to such painstaking length. These Shiva guardians at the entrance to the sanctuaries, they are true works of art. They differ in color because they were made not from grey, but from black chlorite schist. At the center of the main sanctum stands a 6-meter granite statue of Chenakeshava, supposedly another form of Vishnu. And this curious creature is called a Yaksha, a mythical demigod or spirit combining features of animals and humans. It's often depicted with split heads or bodies, symbolizing duality and the merging of various forces, its connection to nature, magic or supernatural powers. One of the idols in Veer Narayana had a similar look. Then, when I visited Hoysala in town of Halebeedu, I discovered it wasn't alone. Even from satellite images, you can see strange, almost sci-fi structures every 50 meters. And that's not counting those still buried underground. It's as if there was once a large ancient city here, and these so-called temples may have been markets or something like university halls. And indeed, official history acknowledges that this place was once the temporary capital of the Hoysala kingdom. There are many fascinating ruins here that can tell us a lot. For example, the actual foundations of these ancient temples. Turns out they are made from giant monoliths with carved recesses. These complexes were assembled like giant Lego structures. By the way, there are smaller pieces too. One particular mysterious structure is a well with mandapas, looking almost like transformers with water cooling systems. In the nearby lake, there's a clearly artificial, perfectly circular mound. And site photos reveal cut stone fragments that were clearly part of a larger construction. And the crown jewel of the region, the twin temples of Hoysala and Shantaleshvara. The complex consists of two buildings set on the same platform. One supposedly dedicated to Shiva and other to Parvati. These structures are identical, except that the Shiva building contains, in addition to the sanctum, mandapa and altar with Nandi the bull, an extra sanctum for Surya, the sun god. This temple is packed with everything we saw in Chenakeshava. 2,400 unique carvings of animals and deities, engraved panels, astonishing columns and complex ceilings. The ancient builders left no surface untouched. Everything is covered in intricate carvings and designs like an elaborately painted egg. The word minimalism clearly wasn't known here. Instead of idols, in this case there's a Shiva lingam. Here is a block in Hoysala that shows all the signs of stone casting. If that wasn't done by modern restorers, then it could very well be a basalt block cast in antiquity. And here is one of the reasons why the Hoysala complex is considered the most detailed architectural structure in India. This guardian, or Dvarpala, is crafted with incredible precision. Interestingly, much less attention was given to the faces than to the ornaments and attributes. A statue carved with such detail is unlike anything else. You are unlikely to find works by modern sculptors that even come close in complexity and intricacy. And in India there are thousands like this, if you know where to look. In ancient times, this region was known as Dwara Samudra, which in Sanskrit means gateway to the great waters. Interestingly, each of these complexes we will look at is located near a lake. And in several of those lakes there appear to be man-made islands with temples, much like the Mabon temples in Cambodia. Elements of style. As I mentioned earlier, all these temples share a common feature, a star-shaped floor plan. It is hard to find the perfect word to describe this form, but it unmistakably resembles Angkor Wat in some visual aspects. The temples typically stand on intricately decorated platforms, often featuring elaborate carved panels like this. The temple structure itself generally consists of two main parts, the mandapa, or prayer hall, and Vimana, inner sanctum. Inside the Vimana you will find either a large statue of deity, the temple's main idol, or a Shiva lingam. Some temples also feature a separate Nandi mandapa, where a statue of the sacred bull Nandi, Shiva's vehicle, is placed. And the ceilings, arguably among the most intricately designed in any ancient structure. And then there are the four iconic types of columns. The first one, smooth, round, polished columns. The second one, round columns with rectangular elements. Then, intricately patterned and decorated columns, and wildly elaborate, almost chaotic shapes like this. The exterior walls of the temples are fully covered in bas-reliefs depicting animals, deities, and mythological saints from the past. A recurring visual motif is the presence of divine figures accompanied by tiny humans next to them. This has become a kind of visual signature of ancient India. Most temples also feature at least one creature with the body of a man and the head of an animal, be it an elephant, lion, boar, or something even more mysterious. 3 types of stone were used in the construction of these temple complexes: granite, basalt, and talc chloride. Lingams made from all 3 materials have been found. Basalt and granite were used primarily for foundations, platforms, and steps, while the rest of the structure was crafted from talc chloride, which is also known as soapstone. This stone is 4 times easier to carve than granite. It comes in a wide variety of colors, retains heat well, and cools down slowly. That's why today soapstone is commonly used for fireplace linings, sauna stones, cookware, and statuettes. But ancient builders used it for magnificent columns, ceiling details, massive center slabs in mandapas, and both external and internal decorations. A word about the columns. In India, you can find the sites where ancient columns were made. Evidence suggests they were constructed from 2 or even 3 separate segments. Judging by the precision and symmetry, it's hard to deny that some form of massive lathing device was used to shape these enormous columns. Despite internet commenters insisting that locals can still do this today without issue, there's no documented modern case of anyone replicating these designs with traditional tools. Here is what ChatGPT told me about that. Recreating such columns is indeed a challenging and costly task. Modern craftsmen most often make simpler columns and statues in the Hoysala style, avoiding exact copies of the originals. And this is quite understandable. Just remember the columns with such delicate decorative slits that you can insert a straw into them. But to be completely convinced that advanced technologies were involved here, let's move to Ramappa. This is a great example of a heavily restored temple. Almost the entire structure is now made of sandstone and the statues are made of basalt. If you take a closer look, it becomes obvious that these are modern reconstructions. They are too different from those made of talc chloride, which we are already familiar with. I would venture to guess that before restoration, Ramappa looked much like the ruins of the complex in Kotagulu, which is only 9 kilometers away. Most such complexes without restoration would probably look like that. And here we see elephants carrying lions or some strange deities on their backs. But there were no Disney-style dancing girls here. However, it can be said with confidence, the floor, columns, ceilings and blocks at the altar in Ramappa, these are original elements. I had almost believed that the Indians could have carved all of this by hand from soapstone, but then I saw this. In front of you is a single solid stone block from which the wall at the entrance to the lingam was made. It is simply astounding. Try to even imagine someone manually drawing hundreds of the tiniest details, patterns and geometric figures on such a scale. And here all of this carved from the stone with no room for mistake. And this is far from an isolated case. In almost every complex we have talked about, you will find similar details. How many such forgotten ruins are still scattered across all of India, no one knows. There is no doubt we are talking about mass production of such stone elements, which is only possible with the appropriate level of technology. In the room with the lingam there is a similar slab. The pedestal for the lingam and the ceiling block are true works of art of the highest level of craftsmanship. Vimanas mystery. In the context of India, I couldn't help but touch upon the topic of Vimanas. You may have heard of a text called the Vimanika Shastra, which details the construction of flying chariots used by rulers and generals. Many of you have seen all those amusing pictures and descriptions of weapons with which the Vimanas inflicted damage on enemy troops. However, I must disappoint you. The Vaimanika Shastra is a book written by a self-proclaimed medium named Sabraya Shastri in 1918 through, attention, automatic writing. The author claimed that the text was telepathically transmitted to him by the ancient Indian sage Bharadvaja. In other words, the author most likely fabricated at least a large part of the book. In the late 90s and early 20th century, creating books by this method was a worldwide trend. Recall Blavatsky and Helena Roerich, for example. But the Vaimanika was quickly picked up by sensationalist journalists, and nowadays no one even checked the source for authenticity, presenting it as Vedic truth. But don't be too upset, because there actually were ancient texts about Vimanas. One of these is the Vimana Shastra, the science of Vimanas. It didn't exist during the Vedic period. Like all Shastras and Tantras, it appeared in medieval India. The Vimana Shastra is a collection of mentions of Vimanas in the Rigveda, Mahabharata and Ramayana. No pictures, only textual descriptions. So, to the point, what do these texts say about Vimanas? The Rigveda mentions the heavenly chariots of the gods, which fly through the skies at incredible speeds using only energy or divine power. The Ramayana describes the Pushpaka Vimana, the flying chariot belonging to the demon Ravana. Here is how artists have depicted it. The Pushpaka is described as an aerial palace that moves by itself and is controlled by divine will. There you have it, a drone. Recall that Ravana was considered a mythical ruler of Sri Lanka, where you all know what is located. The Mahabharata describes the battle at Kurukshetra, where it is mentioned that Arjuna's arrows shot from his chariot could destroy entire armies. According to mythological texts, Vimanas were made from gold, precious stones and other heavenly materials. Thus, it can be assumed that the metal from which they were made was very expensive, which is not surprising, since it had to be both light and very strong at the same time. In both the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, heroes traveled on their Vimanas through the skies and to divine worlds. This can be interpreted as the ability to travel to other planets or parallel dimensions. To be fair, it should be said that in these myths, Vimanas very often serve as metaphor for the spiritual enlightenment of heroes and gods, the ability to look at conflict as if from above, to think clearly without emotional involvement. This is especially clearly revealed in the Mahabharata, where Arjuna's chariot symbolizes self-control and inner mastery, and the horses harnessed to the chariot represent the senses and emotions that overwhelm the hero during moments of inner conflict and cause him to lose control of the chariot. However, given the extreme antiquity of the texts, the question arises, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Did metaphorical ancient texts about spiritual development based on old myths give rise to new myths and speculations by authors who wanted to find UFOs in ancient writings? Or did a war of a past highly developed civilization take place, the chronicles of which were later used to create esoteric teachings about the human psyche that would become the tradition of yoga? But the most interesting thing is that it could be both, and the perspective simply changed due to a shift in the context of reality. Let's be honest, such frequent mentions of flying palaces in ancient texts point to one thing. During the time of the events of the Ramayana and Mahabharata, flying machines did exist. The issue is that, for some reason, the following generations who passed down this knowledge orally no longer had the same descriptive language and lived in a different context and at a different level of development. By the way, if anyone knows where to find the translation of the Vimana Shastra from Sanskrit into any language, please contact me by email in the description. Kopeshwar Observatory. This is a very interesting and unique structure. The columns here look a bit different, and the mandapa doesn't have a roof at all. According to one theory, it is unfinished, according to another, it was designed that way. On top, there are 12 round elements associated with the zodiac signs. Once a year, the full moon aligns exactly in the middle of the dome. It looks just amazing. One cannot ignore the Amruteshvara complex. Here again are mirror-like columns, ceilings that are beyond praise, an idol inside the sanctuary, and bas-reliefs depicting Vanaras, monkey-like warriors who helped Rama in the battle against demons. Such images are often found in Indian temples, and you can also see them in Cambodia. The exterior finish here looks as if it were designed by some kind of artificial intelligence and executed using CNC machines. I also noticed the floor. There are dents and traces resembling melted stone. What is it? Natural erosion due to high humidity? Wear on the stone from walking? Or the result of exposure to high temperatures? And this photo is quite interesting. Now, as I mentioned, real antiquity here often goes unnoticed. In the town of Kalgi, you can find ruins of 3 clearly ancient temples and even one unique small temple on the water. All of them are abandoned and used only as local hangout spots. An interesting place to visit given the lack of effort to restore the ancient heritage. The roof of Mallikarjuna temple in Kuruvati was clearly restored. Modern Indians amusingly refined it now, if you can say so. But once inside, you will have no doubt that this is truly ancient temple. It's as if Giger was inspired by local motifs when creating the concept for Alien. And the exterior facade features elements we are already familiar with. By the way, just 100 kilometers away, in the town of Sudi, there is an almost identical Mallikarjuna temple. The legend of Mallikarjuna. During my investigation, I began to notice that many what I believe to be ancient temples in southern India are dedicated to Mallikarjuna. Mallika means jasmine and Arjuna is one of Shiva's names. This led me to learn a very beautiful legend. Shiva and Parvati has 2 sons, Ganesha and Kartikeya. One day they argued about who deserved a special reward. Shiva proposed a test. Whoever first circled the world would be the winner. Ganesha, understanding that he couldn't quickly travel around the entire world, showed wisdom. He simply circled his parents, considering them his world. Thus, he became the winner. Kartikeya, feeling offended by this, went to live in seclusion on Mount Krauncha. His parents, wishing to be near Kartikeya and to calm him, went to Mount Krauncha as well. On this mountain they stayed, and Shiva took the form of Mallikarjuna while Parvati became Bhramaramba. This place became known as Srisailam, one of the most revered sites for worshipping Shiva. And guess what temple I found there? Yes, there is an equally ancient Proto-Indian temple dedicated to Mallikarjuna, surrounded by many other buildings in a variety of more modern styles. We see a clear connection between the worship of Shiva and the oldest temples in India. This is not surprising, since Shivaism is considered one of the oldest branches of Hinduism, tracing its roots back to the pre-Vedic period. Therefore, to find ancient sites in India, one should primarily look for temples dedicated to Shiva and his various manifestations, as well as pay attention to the external appearance of the buildings. Now that I've shown you all the astonishing details of these temples, I can tell you that official historians refer to them as temples of the Hoysala dynasty. They are dated to the 12th century AD, that is 800 years ago. However, if we look at what was supposedly built before the Hoysalas and after them, a question arises. How could such a significant technological leap occur in just 300 years, followed by a return to more primitive architecture? Maybe the Hoysala dynasty merely restored an ancient legacy that had existed here long before them. Among other similar temples, I recommend looking at Lakshmi Narasimha in Javagal, the Sun Temple in Modhera, the modest and quite unusual Mahadev Temple, Akana Basadi and Kesava Temple. Today we have considered a small but the most interesting part of them. It is worth noting that most of these temples are concentrated in southwestern India, in the state of Karnataka. Also, it cannot be overlooked that the layout of these buildings from above strongly resembles the layout of the Kailasa complex, as if the ancient builders of these complexes followed a same logic and were not separated by a great span of time. Lost technologies. Researchers from various fields have conducted a number of studies and proven that all those round columns, black bas-reliefs and detailed altar slabs in the temples we talked about today are made from talc chloride of 3 types. But the question of how the ancient builders created such marvels remains unanswered. Stone casting can be immediately ruled out. Talc chloride breaks down when heated. It doesn't turn into a liquid necessary for casting. It loses its structure, decomposing into oxides of magnesium, silicon and aluminium, which cannot be reassembled. Microscopic and chemical analysis of the Hoysala columns shows they consist of natural talc chloride without synthetic additives. Thus, geopolymer concrete can also be dismissed. What about lasers? Talc chloride can be subjected to laser engraving and polishing. That's interesting, but cutting it with a laser would be difficult without damaging its structure, unless the laser is very delicate and high-powered. However, what soapstone is perfectly suited for is hydroabrasive cutting and manual processing. Well, could those devices held by the giants depicted here be hydroabrasive cutting heads? That would also explain why most temples are located near bodies of water. But we should not dismiss the possibility that all this could have been done by hand. Talc chloride, as we know, is a very soft stone, even sharp knives can chip it. So, theoretically, it is possible to work it manually. Yet, to produce such a vast number of high-quality elements for hundreds, even thousands of complexes built roughly in the same period, you would need hundreds of thousands of highly skilled stone workers. Rock-cut complexes. On Elephanta Island, which is called Garapuri in India, the city of caves, there is something amazing. Here, in basalt rock, quite impressive shrines are carved and very detailed bas-reliefs have been preserved. I would love to see how all this looked in those times. And it is basalt, not some kind of soapstone. And right here is one of the most famous statues of Shiva in the world, 6 meters tall. The scale of the complex is well felt when you see how small people look here. There are 7 caves on the island, 2 of them Buddhist. The solitary temple of Dharmarajeshwara, carved from a single piece of rock, looks like a smaller and less detailed version of the Kailasa complex. The same technique was used here. Everything was carved in the rock monolithically. The passage to it is also impressive, somewhat reminiscent of the tunnels near Lalibela in Ethiopia. The caves Karla and Bhaja, located close to each other, are considered Buddhist. Nevertheless, they represent quite impressive complexes with interesting architectural solutions. They are dated to the 1st and 2nd century BCE. They look very mystical and are carved like Kailasa in basalt. It is quite unusual to see everyday scenes on the Buddhist bas-reliefs. Looking at Bhaja, it seems the cave was subject to deliberate destruction, as the front facade is almost gone. The official reasons named are erosion and earthquakes. Nearby, there is an interesting collection of 14 stupas. The purpose of them is probably known only to their creators. But the most famous concentration of rock-cut structures is, of course, the Ellora caves. Officially, there are 34 structures at Ellora, not counting small caves and carvings. Each is unusual in its own way. After 1,000 years, Ellora resembles a place hosting some kind of architectural festival where Hindus, giants and Buddhists competed in skill of carving structures from monolithic rock. For example, there is a Hindu cave number 29, which looks like this. It amazes with its unique bas-reliefs. Here we have Shiva killing Andhakasura and Ravana shaking Mount Kailasa. The entrance is guarded by such funny lions, more like sea lions. In the center, of course, there is a lingam. There are also Buddhist caves here, like cave number 10 or this multi-room cave number 12. The giants also left their mark here, creating the most detailed and elaborate bas-reliefs at Ellora. Their structures from 30 to 34 stand slightly apart. Among them, cave number 30 stands out. also called Mini Kailasa. Although it looks unfinished and partially ruined, it still impresses with its appearance. The tower of structure number 32, Indrasambha, amazes with its detail. These interesting elements resemble those we saw in the gates of Warangal. Here at Ellora is the main attraction, the Kailasa complex, the largest ancient rock-cut structure on Earth. I described it in detail in one of the first videos on the channel, you can watch it if interested. I'll just remind you that officials date it roughly to the 8th century AD, simply because supposedly there were no technologies earlier that could allow people to create something like this. But on a stone tablet found nearby and dated to the 3rd century, there is mention of the construction of this complex in the past. I lean towards it being BCE, exactly when is hard to say. The big question remains, what technology was used to build it? Recently, one of my subscribers sent me a video showing an existing technology for stone carving using lasers. This is what it looks like. Laser engravers have been used in industry for quite some time, but only in recent years compact portable versions started to appear. Nowadays you can even buy a home engraver for $300 designed for soft materials. Working with stone requires something much more powerful and expensive. And for so-called Kailasa temple, an even more powerful device would be needed. And such technology could have existed back then, if we stopped thinking that humanity only recently reached this level of development. Earlier, I thought of an analogy with 3D printers and designing a model in 3D. But after learning about laser engravers, everything became even clearer. This even explains the well-known local legend that the temple was carved overnight, which used to seem like nothing but a myth to me. Some researchers claim that Kailasa was carved out of basalt tuff rock, however, this claim is incorrect. Such a massive structure made of tuff simply wouldn't have survived to this day, as tuff is porous, brittle and mainly used for smaller decorative items. The truth is that Kailasa and all the temples of Ellora were carved from trap basalt, which by the way is even slightly stronger than regular basalt. The trap basalt here was formed as a result of massive lava eruptions on the Deccan Plateau around 65 million years ago. Regular basalt is younger and formed through lava eruptions from a volcanic cone, whereas trap basalt is deposited in massive layers through cracks in the Earth's crust. On the Mohs scale, they are nearly identical in hardness, but trap basalt is older, more massive and typically forms plateaus, which is exactly what we see in this case. There are still many mysteries in India, and in the second part of the film we will talk about the famous step wells, ancient cities of India, lingams and giants of ancient India. And to those who watched this video till the end, I want to share something personal. Music has long been a part of my life, and recently I decided to create my own musical project. Today, on the day this video is released, my first track has come out. You can watch the music video for it on the Dark Wayne channel. If you enjoy my content and don't mind rock music, there's a good chance you will like it. There will be songs not only in my native language, but also in English. So thank you all for watching and see you on the Dark Wayne channel.